I was holding 2 glasses of wine when it happened. She'd asked me to grab them while she found us a spot near the back of the room, away from the main crowd, which I'd thought was because she wanted a quiet corner and not because she'd seen the Hargroves coming across the floor toward her. I turned around, and they were already there, an older couple, well-dressed, the kind of people who move through a room like they own the invitation list. And she was smiling at them with a particular warmth she reserved for people whose opinion she cared about. She gestured at me. "This is David," she said. "A friend." I smiled. It was automatic. The way smiling is when your brain hasn't caught up to what just happened. I shook the man's hand. I stood there while they talked to her for 3 minutes about something I can't recall, because I was standing half a step behind her holding both glasses of wine, including hers, like a man waiting for his turn to be introduced properly. His turn didn't come. When the couple moved on, she turned back to me and took her glass from my hand and said, "Thanks, baby," in the easy voice she used when things were going well, and then she was already looking across the room at someone else. A friend. I'd been with her for 14 months. We met at a friend's barbecue 2 summers ago. I saw her across the yard and spent 20 minutes finding a reason to be on that side of it, which she told me later she'd noticed immediately and found charming rather than obvious. That was a good sign. We talked until the food was cold and exchanged numbers in the driveway, and I drove home thinking about her the whole way back. I'm David, mid-30s, architect, grew up in a house where money was something you worried about rather than something you had. I mention that because it matters to what came later. The first year was good, genuinely good, not the kind of good you revise downward once it's over. Rachel came to Thanksgiving at my mother's house and sat at the kitchen table and listened to my mother's stories about growing up and cried at the one about my grandmother, which made my mother love her immediately. She sent flowers afterward with a handwritten note. My mother called me to tell me I'd better not mess it up. We moved in together after 14 months. I thought I was going to marry her. I'd met some of her friends, coworkers, mostly casual dinners, the kind of social occasions that feel like the warm-up act before the real introduction. Her parents were a different matter. I'd spoken to her mother on the phone twice, both times briefly, both times with the slightly careful quality of a conversation where someone is present but managed. In person, I hadn't met them yet. Rachel's explanation was consistent and reasonable. Her family was complicated. The timing had to be right. She didn't want to drop me into one of their events without proper context. She said it warmly, always warmly, and I believe her because I had no reason not to, and because her family genuinely did sound like a lot. I stopped asking after a while. I told myself that was patience and not the other thing. 3 months before the charity event, she started attending things without me more frequently. A gallery opening downtown, just colleagues, I'd find it tedious. A long weekend at a lake house, just family, very informal. She'd feel strange bringing someone when her cousins never did. Her cousin Mara's birthday dinner, a whole thing, extended family. She wanted to introduce me properly when it wasn't a circus. Each reason was warm and specific and completely reasonable on its own. I'd agree, and she'd go and come back and tell me about it. And I'd listen, and that would be that. I noticed a frequency. I didn't name it out loud, not even to myself for a while. I told myself she knew her family's rhythms better than I did, and that I was the kind of person who respected that rather than making it into something. I told myself that right up until the night, I was standing in a room holding 2 glasses of wine, and she introduced me to a couple whose opinion clearly mattered to her, and the word she used was friend. The week before the charity event, I had beers with Marcus at the place near his apartment, the one with the bad lighting and the good draft selection that we'd been going to since before he had a wife and a kid and a reason to be home by 10. He's been my closest friend since college, the kind of person who says the thing other people decide not to say, but usually waits until you're ready to hear it. I mentioned Rachel was taking me to a benefit downtown. I said it like good news, which I thought it was. A work event, a big deal for her. I was finally going to meet some of her people properly. I said it like a milestone. Marcus raised an eyebrow. I saw it and said, "What?" He shook his head. "Nothing." I told him it wasn't nothing and that he should say it. He turned his glass on the bar for a second. Has she ever posted a photo of you? Like anywhere? Instagram, anything? I laughed. I told him Rachel wasn't really a social media person, that she found it performative, that she had an account but barely used it. I'd heard her say that herself more than once. Marcus picked up his phone and opened her profile and put on the bar between us. She posted regularly. Not every day, but consistently. Dinners, weekends, events, the kind of curated but natural-looking documentation of a life being lived well. She was smiling in all of them. There were photos from the past year, from the past 2 years, from trips I knew about because she'd told me about them when she got back. I was in none of them. Not once. Not in the background of a group shot. Not tagged by someone else. Not a hand or a shoulder or any evidence that another person had been present. 2 years of her documented life, and I didn't exist in a single frame of it. I scrolled back further than I meant to. Marcus let me look for as long as I needed to. He didn't say anything. When I put the phone down, he picked it up and pocketed it and finished his beer. Then he said, "You ever met her parents?" I said no. He nodded slowly and raised his hand to order another round and didn't push it further. He'd said what he wanted to say. He knew I'd heard it. That was Marcus. He'd hand you the thing you needed to see and then get out of the way and let you do what you were going to do with it. I drank my beer and didn't say much for a while. I'd seen her profile before. I'd looked at it the way you look at something when you're not looking for anything, which is the best way to miss what's there. Marcus had looked at it like someone looking for something specific, and the difference between those two kinds of looking was apparently 2 years of photographic evidence that I had been carefully kept out of. She looked beautiful that night. She spent time getting ready in the way she did when something mattered to her. And when I came out of the bathroom, she was already dressed, and she crossed the room and fixed my tie with both hands and told me she was glad I was coming. In the car, she was warm and easy, and when we walked through the door of the venue, she took my arm and squeezed my hand, and I felt the thing I'd been feeling less of recently, which was certainty. The first 20 minutes were fine. We got drinks. She pointed out a few people, explained who was connected to whom. She kept a hand on my arm. I relaxed. I thought Marcus had been reading into things, and that I'd been reading into things, and that the photo thing had a simpler explanation I just hadn't thought of yet. Then the introduction started. "This is David, a friend." Handshakes, smiles, the couple moving on. David, one of my friends. A woman from her industry, air kisses, a brief exchange. "This is David." Just my name, floating there, attached to nothing. I waited for the correction each time. The easy addition, my boyfriend, we actually live together, anything. It didn't come. By the third introduction, I was paying attention in a different way. By the sixth, I had stopped waiting and started counting. 6 introductions over the course of an hour, and in not one of them was I anything more than David, a friend, one of her friends, or just David. I stood next to her and smiled and shook hands and said the things you say, and inside something was going very quiet and very still. Then I saw her across the room. She'd move away from me slightly. We'd separated for a few minutes while I went for drinks, and she was standing near a tall man in his late 30s in a suit that fit the way suits fit when they're made for you rather than bought. He leaned in and kissed her on both cheeks. She laughed, the bright, slightly elevated laugh she used when she was performing rather than feeling, the one I'd heard her use on calls with people she needed something from. He put his hand on the small of her back. She didn't move it. I stood there with 2 glasses of wine and watched for a full minute. They talked the way people talk when they have a history and a comfort with each other that precedes the current conversation. She touched his arm once. He said something, and she tilted her head back. She didn't look in my direction once. She didn't bring him over. She didn't wave me across. When she came back to me 10 minutes later, she was slightly flushed and bright-eyed, and she took her drink and said the event was going well, didn't I think, and began telling me about a silent auction item she'd seen near the back. I asked who the man was. She said, "Which man?" I described him. She said, "Oh, that's just Elliot. He's a family friend. I've known him forever." She said it lightly, already moving on, her eyes finding someone else across the room. "Come on, I want to show you the auction." I followed her. I didn't say anything else, but I filed the name, the way she'd said it, and the hand on her back that she hadn't moved, and I added it to the list of things I was carrying quietly through that evening. The Uber was quiet on the way home. Rachel had her phone out and was scrolling with a particular focused blankness of someone who doesn't want to talk and is using the phone to say so without saying so. I watched the streets go past for a while. When we were about 5 minutes from the apartment, I said, evenly, "Why did you introduce me as a friend all night?" She didn't look up immediately. When she did, it was with the expression she used when she was tired, and I was adding to it. "Babe, please. I'm exhausted. Can we not do this right now?" I said, "I'd like to know." She sighed in a way that was meant to communicate reasonableness being stretched beyond its limits. "It's a work crowd," she said. "It's complicated. There are people there I have to manage professionally, and I didn't want to get into a whole explanation of us tonight." It wasn't a big deal. I said it was 6 times. She looked back at her phone. "I know it felt weird. I get it. Can we talk about it tomorrow?" I let a moment pass, and then I said, "Who was the tall guy by the bar? The one who kissed you hello?" Her thumb stopped moving on the screen, just for a beat. Then she was scrolling again. "That's Julian," she said, with the careful lightness of someone choosing a tone. "Old family friend. Our parents have known each other forever. He was at my 16th birthday. It's that kind of thing." She glanced over at me briefly. "Why?" I asked if he was single. She looked at me differently then. "What? Why would you ask that?" I said I was just asking. She said he was dating someone. She thought. She wasn't sure. She didn't keep track of his personal life. Then she said, "Can we please stop?" and turn back to the window. We didn't speak for the rest of the ride. At home, she showered and went to bed without the usual rhythm of the end of our evenings. No conversation from the bathroom, no asking if I wanted tea, no checking in. Just the shower running and then the bedroom light going off. I sat on the couch in the dark. After a while, I opened her profile on my phone and started scrolling back further than I'd gone with Marcus. I went back 8 months and stopped. There was Julian, a photo I'd scrolled past before without registering. Rachel in a green dress, her arm linked through his at what looked like a wedding. Both of them laughing at whoever was taking the picture, close in the way people are when they're comfortable being photographed together. The caption said, "Celebrating with my favorites." I went to the comments. Midway down, from Rachel's mother's account, a comment with a small pink heart emoji. "Look how happy you two look, 2 hearts." I put my phone face down on the couch cushion and sat there in the dark apartment and thought about the man whose name she'd hesitated before saying, whose hand on her back she hadn't moved, whose presence in a photo 8 months ago had made her mother use a heart emoji. She'd said he was a family friend. Her mother's comment suggested he was something her family had a feeling about, and I was the person she'd introduced 6 times that evening as a friend. I was rinsing plates on a Tuesday evening when I saw it. It was on the side table near the door, the place where mail accumulated before one of us dealt with it. I hadn't noticed it come in. Thick cardstock, cream-colored, the kind of envelope that has weight to it. My name wasn't on it. I picked it up because it was open and I could see the calligraphy on the card inside, and I suppose I was curious. Engagement party. Rachel's cousin, a name I recognized from stories. A country club in the suburbs, 2 weekends out. The invitation was addressed to Rachel. Just Rachel. No one guessed. No +1 line. No blank to fill in. I stood there holding it for a while. Rachel came home 20 minutes later and saw me at the side table with the invitation in my hand, and something moved across her face before she arranged it. "Oh, yeah," she said, put her bag down, moving into the kitchen. "That came yesterday. It's a family thing, kind of stuffy. You'd hate it honestly. I'm probably not even staying long." She'd said all of it in about 4 seconds. I asked if Julian would be there. The pause was less than a second. Someone who wasn't watching for it wouldn't have caught it. "Probably," she said, opening the fridge. "It's that whole circle. They all know each other." "Why?" I said no reason. I put the invitation back on the side table and straightened it and went back to the kitchen, and we made dinner and talked about other things, and I was present for all of it in the way you could be present for something while a completely separate process is running underneath. That night, I lay next to her in the dark, and listened to her breathe and thought clearly for the first time in a while. The question I'd been turning over, whether something specific was happening with Julian, whether there was something to find if I looked hard enough, wasn't actually the question. The question was simpler and worse. Rachel was warm with me in private. She was good at this, at us, in the apartment with the door closed. She remembered things I told her and made me feel known and reached for my hand in the dark. And she had introduced me 6 times in one evening as a friend. She had kept me out of every photograph for 2 years. She had taken me to one public event and managed me through it like a detail to be handled. She had an invitation addressed to her alone to a party where the man her mother posted heart emojis about would also be present. The question wasn't whether she was going to tell Julian about me at that party. The question was whether she'd ever been planning to tell anyone about me. Whether I was the real life she was living quietly while she maintained a different one for the people whose opinions shaped hers. Whether the timing was ever actually going to be right, or whether the right timing was a door she kept describing without ever intending to open. I didn't know the answer, but I knew I was done letting her answer it for me on her own schedule. The door didn't slam. It just closed quietly, the way things end when you finally stop holding them open. I said nothing. The morning after I'd lain in the dark, making the decision that didn't feel like a decision, I kissed her goodbye at the door the same way I always did. I cooked on my nights. I asked about her day and listened to the answers. I was on the surface exactly the boyfriend I'd been for 2 years. I was also paying attention in a way I hadn't let myself pay attention before, which turns out to be a different thing entirely. I went through the photos she'd been tagged in, not her own posts. I'd been through those with Marcus and knew what they contained and didn't contain. The ones other people had tagged her in, her mother's account, her aunts, cousins, the wider family architecture I'd never been introduced to in person. Her mother had posted 3 times in the past year with Rachel in them. All 3 included Julian. A dinner at someone's house, the kind of photo that gets taken at the end of an evening when everyone is warm and comfortable. A holiday gathering, Rachel and Julian standing close in front of something decorated, both of them mid-laugh. A beach house photo from last summer. A group on a deck, Julian beside her, her head slightly tilted toward him in the way you tilt toward someone you're used to being near. That one had a caption from an aunt. It said, "Asterisk ring next year? Winking face asterisk." It had 14 likes. Rachel's mother had liked it. I screenshotted all 3. I put them in a folder and kept it to myself. I didn't tell Marcus. I wasn't ready for his particular brand of being right. The Friday before the party, Rachel told me she was leaving early Saturday and coming back Sunday night. She said it warmly, the way she said things she'd already settled, and then she said, "Enjoy the quiet weekend, baby," and smiled at me and went to finish packing. The dress she was taking cost more than my car payment. I know because she'd shown it to me when she bought it 2 months ago, and I'd mentally noted the number in the way you do when money is something you grew up being careful with. I lay in bed that night and waited until her breathing steadied. Then I got up and went to the kitchen where she'd left her laptop open, the way she always did, no password screen because she felt safe in the apartment and she had always been safe here. That part was real. I sat down and opened her calendar and went to Saturday. The event was titled Engagement, Meg and T / also family photos re J. I read it twice. Then I read it again. Family photos regarding Julian at an engagement party for her cousin. On a weekend she'd told me to enjoy quietly at home. I closed the laptop and went back to bed and lay there in the dark and thought about Marcus sitting at that bar asking if she'd ever posted a photo of me and how I'd laughed and how he'd handed me his phone and waited while I understood what I was looking at. Family photos. I set my alarm for 7. I drove 90 minutes and thought about almost nothing the whole way. Not what I was going to say, not how it would go, not what her face would do when she saw me. I'd found that if I let myself think about it, I'd start rehearsing, and rehearse things fall apart at the wrong moment. I just drove. The country club was the kind of place that announces itself with a long driveway and a parking situation managed by young men in identical jackets. I parked myself and walked in behind a group of 4 who were clearly arriving for the same event, talking about someone's new house in Connecticut. I followed them through the door. The woman at the entrance had a seating chart and a smile, and I told her I was with the cousin's side, and she waved me through without looking down. I walked into the main reception room. Rachel was 90 seconds away from where I was standing. She was on Julian's arm. I want to be precise about that. Not standing near him, not in a group that included him, but on his arm in a specific way that communicates something to the people watching. They were standing with an older couple I recognized from her mother's photos. Her parents. Her father had a glass of something and was laughing at whatever Julian had just said. Her mother was looking at Julian the way her mother's comments on photos had suggested. She looked at Julian. Rachel was leaning into him slightly. Just slightly. The way she leaned into me when we were at a party and she was comfortable and we were together. I watched for 60 seconds. Then I walked across the room. She saw me at about 15 feet. The color left her face in one movement, like a light going off. She said, "David." I kept walking. I stopped at the edge of the circle and smiled politely and turned to the man beside her and extended my hand. "Hi," I said. "You must be Julian. I'm David. I've been living with Rachel for about 14 months. We've been together for 2 years." Julian's face did several things at once. He took my hand out of pure reflex, the social instinct overriding everything else, and we shook hands in the middle of what was happening. Rachel's mother said, "I'm sorry, what?" Rachel's father turned to his daughter and said, "Rachel, what is this?" Rachel said, "David, please not here. Let's go outside," and touched my arm. I turned to her parents. I kept my voice warm and level. "It's very nice to finally meet you both," I said. "Rachel has never introduced us. I've been hoping to meet you for about 1.5 years. I paused. I understand now why that hadn't happened. Her mother was looking at Rachel. Her father was looking at Julian. Julian was looking at a point somewhere past my shoulder with the expression of a man rapidly revising a significant number of assumptions. I turned back to him. "I don't know what you've been told," I said. "But whatever is, you should probably ask some follow-up questions." I held his gaze for a moment. "Good luck." Then I turned to Rachel. "You can have the apartment for the month," I said. "The lease is up after that, and I won't be renewing. Your things will be in boxes by the door when you get home." She said, "David, please, please don't do this. It's not what." I said, "Rachel." I looked at her. Then I looked at her father's face, which had gone very still in the particular way of a man who has understood something he didn't know he needed to understand. "Look at your father's face," I said. "This is exactly what it is." I smiled once more at her parents. I nodded at Julian, and I walked back through the room the way I'd come in, past the cocktail tables and the flower arrangements and the other guests who had no idea what they'd just been on the edges of. Behind me, before the door closed, I heard Rachel's mother begin a sentence. She said, "Rachel Elizabeth." The door closed. I walked to my car. I sat in it for a moment in the quiet of the parking lot, the late afternoon light coming through the windshield, and then I started the engine and drove home. I didn't speed on the way home. I took the same roads I'd taken up at the same pace, and about halfway back, I saw a diner set back from the road with its lights on, and I pulled in because I hadn't eaten since morning and my hands were steady, but the rest of me needed something ordinary to do. I sat at the counter and ordered eggs and ate them alone and tipped well and got back in the car. The apartment was quiet when I got in. I changed out of my jacket and hung it up, and then I started packing her things. I want to be clear about how I did it. Methodically, not cruelly. I knew where everything was because I lived there too, and I'd been living alongside her things for 14 months. I folded her clothes the way she liked them folded and put them in her suitcases. Her toiletries went into the bag she used for travel. Her books went into 2 boxes with the spines facing up, so she'd be able to see what was what. I took the succulents and watered them and left them on the windowsill because they were alive and hadn't done anything wrong. Everything went by the door. Neat. Organized. A life ready to be collected. I sat on the couch at 9 o'clock when my phone started ringing. Rachel. I watched it ring and didn't pick up. She called twice more in the next 40 minutes. Then a text arrived. Asterisk, please let me explain. I owe you that. Please. Asterisk. I put the phone face down. An hour later. Asterisk, I'm so sorry. I'll make this right. Asterisk. I went to bed. Just before midnight, the third one came through. I saw it in the dark because the screen lit up the room. Asterisk, Julian ended things. My parents aren't speaking to me. Please. Asterisk. I turned the phone over and went to sleep. Sunday afternoon, I heard a knock and opened the door, and Marcus was standing there with 2 coffees and a paper bag and the expression of a man who had figured out the general shape of things. He said, I figured. I'll let him in. He helped me carry the boxes from the bedroom into the hallway without being asked and without making it into anything. Then we sat on a couch and drank the coffees, and he brought bagels, and we ate those too. We didn't talk about Rachel much. We talked about his kid, who had recently worked out how to open the refrigerator and was treating this as a full-time occupation. We talked about a professor we'd both had in college whom Marcus had seen an obituary for during the week. A good man, a good teacher, the kind you remember for specific things he said, rather than just the general fact of him. At some point, Marcus looked at the boxes by the front door and then looked at me and said, proud of you. 2 words. That was it. I nodded once and looked at the middle distance and didn't say anything back because I didn't trust what might come out if I tried. He stayed another hour. When he left, he clapped me once on the shoulder and said he'd call tomorrow. I said okay. I closed the door and stood in the apartment that was quieter now than it had been the night before, though technically nothing had changed yet except the boxes by the door. It felt like more had changed than that. Rachel came home Monday evening. I know because Marcus's phone picked up her car in the background of a voice message she left at 9. She must not have known she was still recording. Her voice sounded tired in a way that was different from her usual tired. I listened to that one. I didn't call back. She called 14 times over the next 4 days. She sent 2 long letters that I could see were long from the preview and didn't open, and one short one that I read because something about its length suggested she'd stopped trying to construct an argument. She said she didn't expect forgiveness. She said she told her parents everything, the full version, not a managed one. She said she told Julian the same. She said she knew it was late to say any of it, and she was saying it anyway because he deserved to know it had been said. She didn't ask for anything. I read it twice and then put my phone down and found I had nothing I needed to say back. Not because I was punishing her with the silence, just because the silence was true. Everything that needed to happen had happened, and she'd been part of it, and there was nothing left for me to add. I didn't reply. My new apartment is smaller. I picked it because of the kitchen window. It faces east, and in the mornings it fills the whole kitchen with light, the kind of light that makes coffee taste better than it deserves to. I moved in 6 months after the country club and painted the bedroom a color I chose alone and have no feelings about except that I like it. I'd stopped sketching during the relationship. I couldn't have told you when exactly, just that I'd look at my drafting pencils on the shelf and decide it wasn't a good day for it, and then weeks would pass. I've started again. On weekend mornings, sometimes I take a pad to whatever neighborhood I feel like and sit somewhere and draw the faces of old buildings, the window proportions, the brickwork, the way a cornice catches light. It asks nothing of me except attention. I'm getting good again. Marcus and his wife have me over every other Sunday. I bring wine and eat whatever they've made, and his kid, who can now not only open the refrigerator but has opinions about what should be in it, performs various achievements for me with great seriousness. It's the best part of most weeks. My mother visits once a month. Every time she comes, she looks at me at some point during the visit and says, "You look like yourself again." She says it the way she says things she's been thinking since the last time she saw me. I don't ask her to explain what she means. I know what she means. A year after the country club, I was at a friend's birthday party. Backyard, string lights, the good kind of low-key where no one is performing. I was standing near the drinks table when someone I hadn't met before came to stand beside me. A woman named Hannah, a cousin of the host, in from out of town for the weekend. She introduced herself and asked how I knew the birthday boy. We talked for 20 minutes about architecture and a road trip she'd taken and a book we'd both read and a city she was thinking about moving to. Easy conversation, the kind that doesn't need to be managed. Another guest came up while we were talking, someone she knew, and Hannah turned and said, without pausing or calculating anything, "This is David. I just met him, and he's very interesting." I laughed. Actually laughed. I'm not seeing anyone yet. I'm not rushing toward anything. But I stood in that backyard with a drink in my hand and registered what had just happened. Someone who'd known me for 20 minutes had said my name and attached something true to it, in front of another person, without hesitation. The word friend can mean you're being managed, or it can mean you're just at the beginning of something and the person saying it isn't hiding anything. I got another drink. I stayed until the end of the party. I drove home to my own quiet apartment with the east-facing kitchen window, and I slept well.